Okay, this is a talk that I'd just given at the London Java community, and it's called Never Ignore the Pirate Ship. What software development can learn from improv. So what is improv? Improv is improvisational theatre. This is a chap called Keith Johnston, who did a lot of work developing the ideas of improvisational theatre in the 1950s. And there's one particular story that he tells in his book about the difficulties that improvisers encounter, which has really resonated with me as something that also happens in software development. So if you're not quite sure what improvisational theatre is theatre where there is no script, there is no setting, and the actors just make up a story, a scene, a drama, a comedy on the stage. So one of the things that often happens at the beginning of a scene is that the improvisers ask for a suggestion from the audience. So they might ask for a setting. So that's what we see is happening here, possibly. And one of the settings that the audience might suggest, if they're being helpful, is a ship. So the improvisers are on a ship. And when the scene starts, when one of the improvisers starts with a scene, somebody might notice, for example, on the horizon, a pirate ship. Now, for the purpose of the story and the purpose of the scene, this is great because this is something dramatic. This is something interesting that's going to happen that the improvisers can wrestle with, and the audience watching that story will be entertained. One of the things that Johnston points out, though, is that there's another kind of pitfall that can happen at this kind of point, is that somebody else can say, well, let's brush the decks, let's scrub the decks. And it's interesting why this might happen. So one of the reasons that this might happen is that moving the story forward is scary for the improvisers. It involves them all doing things which are scary, and they're standing up in front of people. So if they have to deal with the pirate ship, they might reveal themselves as not as good at improvising as they thought they were. They might not be interesting. They might be boring. They might say the wrong thing. Whereas if they're all doing this, what Johnston calls agreed activity, then it's much less dangerous for them. It's a kind of, it feels safe. Everybody's doing the same thing. Nobody's standing out. Nothing's different. But of course, for the audience, it's very boring and it doesn't advance the story. And if you're hanging on to the metaphor, you might also say, well, the pirate ship's still coming. The pirate ship's still moving down towards them over the horizon, even though they're all relying on or engaged in scrubbing the decks. Why might people do this? So one of the interesting things about this is that people are tempted by this kind of agreed activity, scrubbing the decks, rather than acting as they might do if they've seen a pirate ship, because it feels safe. So as you can see there, there might be some issues with life belts that they're not actually safe, but also kind of like the reason I've got good old Sigmund Freud there is that this is very deep down subconscious. So people behave in these ways in improvisation. Nobody's told them to. Nobody's told them to all agree to scrub the decks, but they do it anyway because this is a safe thing to do. And so part of what you're trying to do in improvisation is to shake people out of those agreed activities and get them to engage with this pirate ship, because that's interesting from the point of view of improvisation. It's interesting from the point of view of the audience. I'm going to kind of twist the metaphor a bit here. What happens if you just carry on doing that agreed activity? Well, what happens is that you get entrenched. So we're moving from the water to the land. But I mean, it's interesting that this metaphor does naturally move like that for me anyway. You had open seas, you had open horizons, and then before you know it, you're in a trench getting shot at. So this is a situation which is another agreed activity, but it's hugely expensive and hugely dangerous. So this strategy that you had for safety of doing this agreed activity results in just something that's very expensive and does damage to the people who are involved and doesn't get any value for anybody. And that's a kind of danger for agreed activity. Now, the thing that I do for a living is that I'm a Scrum Master. I'm an Agile coach. I use Agile approaches to software development to help teams deliver software that's interesting and valuable to the people who want it. And in Agile, there are these meetings. There are some other meetings as well, but these 3 meetings in particular can be used to find pirate ships that are on the environment and to avoid agreed activity. So the daily stand-up is the kind of the most frequent one and the most obvious one, where as part of that daily stand-up, a short meeting every day, the team members say what they've done, what they're going to do, and crucially, what's stopping them. So what obstacles are there? What kind of things are there hovering on the horizon that are stopping them doing what they need to do? The retrospective is an opportunity for the team, typically every 2 weeks, to get together and say, how did we do? How do we do over the last 2 weeks? What problems did we encounter, kind of like the daily stand-up? What sorts of things can we do differently to make us progress better? And obviously, one of the things that can come out of that retrospective process is pirate ships that are on the horizon, things that are stopping the team doing what they need to do, or things that are going to need to be tackled by the team if the project is going to have any possibility of success. And then similar, there's this thing called the show and tell. It sometimes has different names, sometimes called the sprint review or the sprint demo. And this is where the team show the work that they've done to their audience, to their stakeholders. And one of the things that can happen in those kind of meetings is that there can be some surprises, that the audience can be not, find out that what the team has done is not quite what they expect, or even that it's better than they expect, or there are some obvious opportunities from that they didn't imagine when it was started. So Scrum and Agile provide these opportunities to avoid the agreed activity of scrubbing the decks, of everybody doing the same thing and just being safe. But they also provide the opportunity of identifying what the pirate ships are, what the things are that are on the horizon that need to be wrestled with. And some of those things might be kind of islands or oases. Again, I'm mixing metaphors. Positive things that can be discovered and grappled with, not just negative things. So finally, I'm just going to say, if you are involved in a team that's doing software development, just have a think for a moment about what your agreed activities are, what the things that you're doing that are just the equivalent of scrubbing the decks, of being safe, and also what pirate ships there are lurking on the horizon. What sorts of things can you see on the horizon that you really need to tackle and that possibly you're not talking about? I'm Mark Stringer. That's my Gmail address. Marvel Consulting is the company that I'm working with at the moment, and I love working with. Check me out, check them out. Thanks very much.